Thanks so much. I'm Ryan Costello, Policy Director with NIAC, and this is Not Going Back, Civil Rights, Immigration, and Representation in the Next Administration. So a very timely panel, unfortunately today. We're here to address threats to the civil rights of the Iranian-American community and other communities, which are extensive and are driven in large part by geopolitical tensions. In the past couple of years, we've seen 21st century alien land laws that seek to limit the right to purchase property on the basis of national origin. We also have seen major class action litigation targeting banks that close the accounts of Iranian Americans and Iranian nationals alike with impunity. And we also have Donald Trump being reelected and vowing to restore the Muslim ban that targeted Iranians during his first term and also to engage in mass deportation. So we're here to address how can the Iranian American community and other allied groups make sure that they're not going back and instead try to defend their rights in what's possibly going to be a very hostile environment. So here to discuss with us today is our illustrious panel. We have State Representative Gene Wu, who proudly serves the people of District 137 in the Texas House. Prior to being elected in 2012, he served as a prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office, where he sought justice for thousands of crime victims. Gene is currently an attorney in private practice, and he is a dedicated advocate for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Representative Wu is committed to raising awareness and fostering dialogue about the pressing issues facing Asian Americans today. We also have Jason Rathod, a founding partner of Migliaccio and Rathod, LLP, and an accomplished plaintiff side class action lawyer, including in the areas of consumer protection, data privacy, and civil rights. Mr. Rathod has been appointed to leadership teams in some of the most high-profile class action cases in the country. We also have Golnaz Fakhimi, who serves as the legal director of Muslim Advocates and has worked with and for historically and structurally marginalized people across a wide spectrum of contexts and strategies. Her experience and expertise encompass deportation defense, criminal defense, defense of alleged war on terror suspects, habeas corpus actions, civil rights actions, technical assistance to movement leaders and partners, and collaborative advocacy with them. So a lot there, and a lot of these experiences I think we're going to be needing in the years to come. So thank you for joining us. And Gene, one of the things that we were talking about before this panel was the situation that we're coming in with Trump reelected, and is this a worst case scenario for civil rights for a lot of immigrant communities here in the United States?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. No doubt that, to me at least, it was the unthinkable outcome. There were lots of scenarios, mostly ones with at least a Harris White House and various states of control of the U.S. Congress and controls of the state legislatures. We were really hoping that in 25 that all of our communities would mainly be going to D.C. to demand that we have a override law passed by Congress that would stop all the states from doing their all individual stupidity and just wipe it out in one bill. And then we could have defenses in various states to deal with any kind of incoming laws. So that was sort of the best case scenario. Was we had a Democratic controlled House and Senate, White House, and we could, with reasonable effort, pressure the legislative bodies to make reforms and restore our rights. So instead of that, now we're going to be looking at ultra high level defense at probably just the national level, because there's just no way we can defend in Washington, D.C. and defend in like 50 state capitals at the same time. So I think not only does this victory give the hardliners even more ammunition that will encourage them to make future legislation even worse. But I think it's going to mean state legislatures will follow suit gladly. And the most disturbing thing is for law this, and another reason why our community needs to activate now and start turning some of this stuff around, is that it's not limited to red states. Many of the laws are being passed in blue states because hate and fear are universal. It's not a partisan thing. That Democrats can hate and fear just as much as anyone else. So I'm trying to be upbeat about it. I mean, it took me like 3 days to get out of bed last week. So, my resolve now is like, we got to fight. What other choice do we have now, right? So that's it.
Golnaz, I want to bring you in because roughly 8 years ago, we started to hear news about Trump imposing a Muslim ban. And I think at the time, a lot of people didn't really believe it, say, oh, he's just campaigning on that. And I think we all found out he very much means a lot of what he does say on the campaign trail. And this time around, he said, not only am I going to bring the Muslim ban back, I'm going to expand it. I think there are a lot of people probably listening, including online today, who are wondering, what does this mean for me? What can I expect with the return of the Muslim ban? Are they going to target Iran? Is it going to be all the same countries? Is it going to be more? So could you unpack for us a little bit, kind of what you're expecting based on your experience so far?
Sure. So I think I'm in suspense, like many people, about what particular shape the next version of the ban might take. We know from public statements that President Trump may intend to increase its scope to include Palestinians seeking entry from Gaza. Beyond that, though, the specifics aren't something that I don't think have been floated in the public domain. However, I do think that there's some guidance that we can kind of take from how the Supreme Court reviewed the third version of the Muslim ban under the prior Trump administration. As many people may recall, the Supreme Court's decision in that case, called Trump v. Hawaii, was a very upsetting one in a lot of ways. It very much is a decision that embraces and gives deference to very broad power invested in the executive under the Immigration and Nationality Act to suspend the entry of foreign nationals when the executive makes findings that doing so would be in the interests of the United States. That being said, the decision also takes a look at the kinds of findings that prior President Trump relied on in support of the third version of the ban that the Supreme Court was reviewing, and emphasized certain aspects of what wound up in that version of the ban. So the court really emphasized that the president's findings resulted from a worldwide review of which foreign governments have been cooperating with the US government in vetting their nationals for entry into the US according to specified security-based rationales. The Supreme Court really emphasized that the executive's findings came out of a multi-agency review process. And then in other parts of the court's opinion, the court also seemed to emphasize the fact that the third version of the ban included things like waivers and exemptions that individuals on a case-by-case basis could assert to seek entry, notwithstanding the categorical prohibitions of the ban. So I bring all of this up to say it's unclear to me, and I think to many people, whether a next version of the ban is going to look like the third version that the Supreme Court upheld or not. I think to the extent that it does, which means that we have good reason to expect it would be legally upheld again, there's still some cause for, I won't call it hope, but some cause to know that advocacy will still be possible. So with respect to exemptions and waivers against, categorical bans, what we know in terms of advocacy that took root after the Supreme Court's decision is that whether those waivers and exemptions are meaningful matters. Courts care about that. How do we know that? We know that in part because of what happened in consolidated class action litigation in which Muslim advocates, together with a number of partners, brought alleging that these exemptions and waivers were not meaningful. They were meaningless. And over many years of effort, that litigation bore fruit. And so as a result of it, tens of thousands of class members are going to get the benefit of sort of a fresh look at their requests for waivers. So, the fact that waivers and exemptions need to be meaningful may be something that could be a source of advocacy, depending on the particulars of whatever next ban may happen. And then I think separate from sort of litigation as an avenue for advocacy, there are other kinds of tools that I feel like are really important to emphasize, especially knowing that the judiciary overall is hostile terrain too. And so we can't sort of hold our breath for good outcomes there, although we know that there may be good arguments to press there. I think something I want to emphasize, even knowing that Congress is hostile terrain as far as the interests of communities who stand to be impacted by another ban go, there's still, I think, power in recognizing the organizing that's happened over the years for legislative narrowing of executive powers to go forward on something like a new version of the ban. So to folks in this room, to folks online, it may be familiar, the name of that legislation. It's called the No Ban Act. I don't expect necessarily that with Congress kind of composed the way that it is, that that kind of legislation would necessarily have a chance of passing, especially since it would have to be signed off by the new president. But I still think that efforts to press for that kind of legislation may be worthwhile in terms of using the harms of a new ban, uplifting the ongoing harms of the prior ban, which are still ongoing. We shouldn't forget that. That's something worthwhile to remember. So it's not always about results. Sometimes I think the effort that can go into organizing around something like proposed legislation, it's simply a way, but a powerful way, to elevate the profile of on-the-ground harms that impacted families face. And that brings me to my next point, which is the importance of narrative work, narrative advocacy, and public advocacy. So something that we're all empowered to do, regardless of who holds formal power within any channel of government, is to talk about the harms that we know are occurring because of government policies. And so I think that there's potentially a lot of utility in prioritizing narrative work that centers the experiences of impacted people who are being harmed by a new version of the ban, who are still being harmed by old versions of the ban, and so on. I think there's always power in that. And then something else that I want to name too is that there's a larger lens that can be useful for advocacy purposes. So that larger lens has something to do with international law and human rights laws. So I can give an example that may be one that is possible to redeploy against a new ban. So there's an international treaty called the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And a lot of really great domestic organizations in the United States leveraged that instrument to make a case for why the third version of the ban that the Supreme Court upheld is harmful and violative of this agreement and violative of international law and norms. And so I think that there will invariably be opportunities to invoke instruments like the ICCPR to present under a larger frame what is harmful and damaging about policies like this. And so I think there's going to be advocacy that we can prioritize. There's going to be narrative work that will be really, really important to prioritize, notwithstanding all that might be prohibitive within sort of formal, traditional legal channels.
And just to try to kind of put some numbers on things, we've been tracking, since the ban first came into place, what was happening to visa issuances and so forth. So back in the Obama administration, it was pretty regular that they would hit 40,000 visas, immigrant and non-immigrant visas to Iranians in a given year.
Mm-hmm.
With the ban, that cratered, went down to 5,000, 8,000, somewhere around there. That's a lot of families who can't see their loved ones. There's a lot of students who can't get visas to come here to study, even though they've very skilled and have been admitted to U.S. universities. And then with the Biden administration, we saw them lift that ban, and the numbers did go up. The last couple of years, I think, have been around 25,000 visas. So about 60,000 visas were probably issued under the Biden administration that wouldn't have been issued otherwise had the ban remained in place. And now we're likely to go back, I think, if there is a ban that targets Iranians to that, kind of single digit in the thousands range, and that's going to impact a lot of people who, have their hopes and dreams and family here. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Jean, I want to go back a little bit and touch base on these alien land laws. And so, you were on the ground in Texas. The first that we really came to know about this issue was when we saw the tweet from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and it essentially said there's a bill in the Texas state legislature, and it would bar any citizen of China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia from purchasing real property in the state, and if it comes to my desk, I will sign it.
Yep.
And so that raised huge alarm bells for us. Iranian Americans often have dual citizenship,
Yep.
so would have barred them from purchasing a home, obviously impacting much broader communities, but you saw a lot of national attention on that bill and kind of a new fight over, essentially this 21st century alien land law. So can you unpack a little bit what went into the kind of successful organizing to prevent that from becoming law?
So that's actually kind of why I'm here, kind of why I've been traveling around the country, trying to talk to Asian communities everywhere to say, like, guys, there's hope. There is a way to fight this. There is a way to deal with it. But it requires all of us to do the thing that we don't want to do, which is get active, which is do something. And so just as background, Texas has probably one of the larger Asian American communities in the United States, but unlike New York, unlike California, the community is much newer. Mostly everyone got here 90s, early 2000s. A lot of people only have been here for 20 years, but only been citizens for 10, et cetera, et cetera. So the Asian community out there is not well organized. It's still large. It has more organization than a lot of other places. But the point being that all politics is just a balance of cost versus reward, right? And the Republicans who are carrying this bill, this plays very well in their primaries. Fear-mongering, Iran, China, those play very well in the Republican primary. So they said, well, this helps us in the primary, and there's basically no cost because the communities that we're attacking don't speak up, they don't vote, they don't organize, they only donate a little bit, and we're not really worried about it, right? Well, if they think there's a huge benefit and no cost, the way to fix it is you tell them there's a cost. And you show them that there will be a cost by you getting the community together. And especially one of the reasons why it was so effective, because again, the Asian community, especially the Chinese community in Houston, they don't protest. They don't get mad. They don't say things when they're upset. Even getting attacked on stuff, they kind of just like, well, we'll just be good Asians and work hard and go and just suffer quietly, right? And we went from that to massive rally at City Hall, right? And then having a massive protest in Chinatown, right? And we've never had an Asian protest ever in the history of the state of Texas. And we were originally thinking maybe there might be one, maybe 200 people out, and we were just going to go walk down the sidewalk. Well, day of, there's about over 1,000 people easily. We stopped trying to figure it out. And the mayor showed up, 2 congressional members showed up, county commissioner showed up, city council showed up, state rep showed up, state senator showed up, right? And instead of being on the sidewalk, the mayor just told the cops, shut down the street. And this is a 8-lane road. This is Bel Air in Chinatown. This is an 8-lane busy road on a Saturday, and we shut it down because we had so many people, we took up basically both sides of the street. That sent a message, and sent a very clear message that people are pissed, right? And you know, if you want to go back to the analogy, now the weights are changing. That's what we have to do on all of this. And again, just to go back a little bit, I'm sorry to take up so much time, but we're not just talking about land, right? At the same time, SB 147 to say like, if you're from these places, you can't buy property. You can't buy a house. You can't buy commercial property. You can't buy farmland. Later on, they even added you can't even own mineral interests. You can't own oil and gas. You can't own timber. That's not the only bill. At the same time, there was another bill that says if you're from these same countries, you cannot go to school in Texas. No private school, no private college, no public university, not even community college. Okay? Florida passed a bill that says if you're from one of these countries, you cannot work. You cannot work with the state of Florida. You may not have an employment relationship with any Florida university. That means no professors, no TAs, no lab assistants, but that also means no graduate students, because most graduate students have a requirement that you're a TA, you're a lab assistant, you do something. Even unpaid, they're barred from it because it's an employment relationship. We're going to have additional laws talking about, so property ownership, who can go to school, who can work, who can do a lot of other things. All the same old laws are all coming back. And it's the same old laws because all the laws are designed to have one message: get out. That's it. These are get out laws. These are messages saying like, we don't want you to be able to live here. We don't want you to be able to grow here. We don't want you to be able to work here. Get out. And here's the thing: the danger is not just for the Chinese community. The danger is not just for the Iranian community. Here's the thing: nobody knows what Chinese people look like, right? To most Americans, it's like, well, you have Asian face, you're Chinese, right? So when the secondary effects of all these laws ripple through across our society, and I tell this to my Vietnamese friends, I tell this to my Korean friends, I tell this to everybody else, it's like, look, you have Asian face too. They won't know and or care what the difference is. Persians, what do Persians look like? They look like a wide variety of people. We don't know. But you know who's going to get identified? Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshi. Because to Americans, that looks Iranian. What do they know? I mean, you think they care? You think they really care? No. So that's what my fear is. It's not just the laws. It's the implications of those laws, because every time we pass one of these laws, it says there's something wrong with these people. And if you pass enough laws that says there's something wrong with these people, well, you better hell do something about it, right? And this is my big concern on this is I think we're headed to a second internment camp. Because every time you say there is something wrong with these people, we can't trust them, right? That's the purpose for these laws. The rationale for all of these laws is national security, national security. The same rationale as there was to pass these laws 100 years ago, 80 years ago against Japanese. National security. And after a certain time, the public sort of gets used to it and says, yeah, I guess so. I mean, we wouldn't round out other people, but I mean, obviously there's something wrong with these people, because why would we keep passing all these laws against them if there wasn't something wrong with them? And I think I think people, when I tell this to people, they say that's kind of hyperbolic, you're going too far with it, like we're different people now, we're better people now. Really? What's changed about humanity, in the last 80 years? We're still the same people as we always are, right? We're just as ignorant, just as violent. So my message to the community, to not just the Iranian community, to the entire Middle Eastern, Arabic-speaking, Muslim community, however you define yourselves, everybody, this is an existential crisis, because their message is get out. And I don't know how to make that more clear. If we do not fight back now, there may not be a home for us to go back to. That's it.
I think that speaks to, a lot of the reason why NIAC's been stepping up, calling attention to this. It's not just Texas where this was proposed. You mentioned Florida. I think our friends at Asian Americans Advancing Justice say nearly a dozen states have enacted some form of these bills: Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Indiana, Arkansas. And now you have...
More than half the states have done it.
And now you have the trifecta at the federal level. And I think a lot of these proposals are going to get picked up. We've been fighting things in Congress, Rounds Amendment and other things that have been attached to National Defense Authorization Act and other things. And under the Biden administration with the Democratic Senate, we've been able to convince people not to go down that road at the federal level, even if they're kind of somewhat narrowly targeted, 500 acres of farmland, stuff like that. But as you speak, the floodgates could open here, and it could be, at the national level, very bad, discriminatory, dangerous laws.
And I think, I'm sorry, my big fear, and the fear that I really want to talk to other people about, like, look, if you look at the states and see which countries they list, there's a wide bell curve of countries. It's not just China, Russia, and Iran. People go out to other Middle Eastern countries, people do Latin American countries, people do other Asian countries, and after a while, you do this enough, people go, why not just all of them? Why not just all the people we don't want here, meaning the non-white ones? Yeah. Right? Because if you look at, one, I'm fearful of what the courts will do, because I think there's no guardrails on that anymore. But two, the bigger concern is, at least in the first Trump administration, you had seasoned public servants who were at least some kind of guardrail to say, hey, that's too far, right? Or they said, I know you want to do this, but quietly, I'm going to slow roll this and make sure it doesn't happen, right? Those guardrails are gone. Stephen Miller is number 2 in the office, right? The actual self-professed white supremacists are now in charge.
Jason.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tough to follow.
Tough to follow. But I did want to bring in kind of another experience of discrimination to the conversation, which is the bank account closures targeting Iranian Americans, Iranian nationals. This is not just an Iran phenomenon. We talked to Arab American allies, they experience this as well. But this issue where you're going along, either you're an Iranian national, you're on a visa like your client was, who was trying to maintain their bank account. All of a sudden they get notices from their bank, need to verify address, things of this nature, and then all of a sudden their bank account is closed. So this causes a lot of hardship. You, in the process of purchasing a home, need to make medical payments, all these things. All of a sudden you're barred from all of your money. So your client ended up suing Bank of America that did this to him, and it turns out through the discovery that Bank of America admits to having closed the accounts of 15,000 individuals of Iranian heritage. So that's just one bank targeting one not particularly big community in the Iranian-American community. But that's the first time we've had a real number about the scale of this financial discrimination. So could you talk through what have you learned through the NIA versus Bank of America case regarding why these account closures keep happening?
Sure, and I'll just start out with, in hearing a lot of the discussion, it's striking how anathema to the civil rights laws a lot of this is. So when you look at Section 1981 of the US Code, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the big thing you can't do is discriminate facially or on its face against particular groups, whether it's their particular ethnic groups, people of specific national origins, in California, whether you have a certain citizenship status. And it's just bedrock civil rights law that if you single out a protected group and you treat them differently from others, that you're essentially liable. That's kind of it. It's different than other theories that are more like disparate impact, that this is neutral on its face and it has a disparate impact on a group. But liability historically has been much clearer for treating a group differently. And so in the Bank of America case, like you said, we had a client who came to us and said, I'm an Iranian national. I had my bank account restricted and then closed seemingly for no reason, arbitrary reasons. And then we looked into it and we saw NIAC has done a lot of great work and documented lots of people's stories who have similar things. And just talking in the room before the panel, I heard similar stories from many other people. So we brought the case and we did find out that essentially Bank of America, and I think this is true of other banks, once you say on your application you are an Iranian national, you get put on a separate track from others. And so then you have different document requirements. And Bank of America and others will say this is required by the sanctions laws, by ITSER, the Iranian Transaction Sanctions Regulations, or the Bank Secrecy Act. But our point was when you look at those laws, they don't actually they don't mention citizenship at all. So what they restrict is if you're an Iranian, what they restrict is that they can't service Iranian accounts, which is if you're physically present and ordinarily resident in Iran, which Bank of America knew. For example, our client, when he went to use his credit card at Whole Foods in San Diego, he was obviously not physically present in Iran, so they had no basis to restrict his account. And this is the vast majority of people. They meet neither of these conditions, so they have no business or no right to restrict or close their accounts. And ultimately, I think we unfortunately lost at the summary judgment stage of the case, and the court in doing so relied on sort of an obscure provision of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, IEPA, which has an immunity provision which says if an entity is honoring an obligation, then they're sort of immune from suit. But we tried to point out there was no contrary obligation here. And I think it's actually quite dangerous because this administration, I think, has indicated that they do tend to expand IEPA or use it to a much greater extent. So this immunity provision is troubling both for private entities like Bank of America and the government to rely more on. And so that's kind of where we stand. But right now, we have appealed the decision to the Ninth Circuit, and our brief should go in the next few months.
So I think what all this gets at, there's just this general deference when someone says national security and say, okay, well, let's strip away some rights, right? Whether it's like getting housing or being able to get visas or being able to bank and so forth. And so, this animosity between the US and Iran, which has been going on decades, bad actions on each side and so forth, that is really contributing, I think, in a lot of ways to this degradation of rights here at home that has a disparate array of impacts. One of the things that was remarkable, with the oral arguments in the case was essentially, Bank of America's lawyers essentially coming around and saying, no, actually, this is exactly the kind of person whose account we should close because at some point in the future, they could become at risk of becoming ordinarily resident in Iran. And that's not what even the laws say. It just says, where are you presently? So
100%. No, I thought it was pretty egregious. Because what Bank of America was essentially saying is like, this is the profile of someone this is a proxy for someone who maybe could return to Iran. But as we all know, you can't, I could go use my business card and present it in an Iranian terminal, and it will have the same effect as if I presented a Visa card. Like, it just doesn't work. There's so many other layers of protection against using an account there that it all feels made up, the defense. They know where their customers are located when they're using their accounts, and this idea that they're potentially at risk is, it's just, it seems arbitrary and completely unnecessary.
And yet, I still think there's a lot more that policymakers could be doing. We probably, frankly, just aren't going to see a lot of attention to this issue over the next 4 years, maybe beyond. But we were having conversations with the Biden administration pointing out this problem, the scale of it once we learned 15,000 Bank of America customers, and saying, look, what can you do to prevent these things from happening? This is, in large respects, a regulatory issue that you have control over, to say, individuals who are present here in the United States, you don't need to close their accounts, so knock it off.
Definitely. I think it's unfortunate the election turned the way it did, but Treasury, Department of Justice, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau all have purview over these various civil rights statutes, as well as private individuals being able to bring suit. But they do have enforcement powers, and they could figure out how are these entities discriminated against Iranians and other protected groups, and how can we go about stopping that? It's unfortunate that we won't get the chance, at least over the next 4 years, to see that, but we can keep advocating.
Fingers crossed.
Right.
Golnaz, let me shift gears a little bit back to the Muslim ban. And I do think we've started to get questions, people who, their loved ones have visas in administrative processing. I imagine there are people whose status may be a little bit uncertain. Maybe they're outside of Iran on a green card. Maybe they're on a temporary visa here. Are there any kind of recommendations that you might have for different groups of people about what to do in advance of a possible ban coming in as soon as January?
Sure. So I referred earlier to, I think, a good outcome overall in consolidated class action litigation on the meaningfulness of the waivers that are supposed to be available under the third version of the Muslim ban that prior President Trump issued. So there are many thousands of people who are still navigating ongoing family separation as a result of the application of the prior ban in its third version to them. And we're rolling out community-facing FAQs and are going to be getting the word out through a lot of networks and grapevines to try to make sure that people who qualify as class members can avail themselves of the relief that is now required as a matter of law because of the stipulated injunction that was issued on a class-wide basis. This doesn't get at everyone who may be facing family separation or something prohibitive in terms of wanting to reunite with family through a visa process. This is pretty narrow, and one of the unfortunate things about the outcome in the litigation is that the class definition leaves out a lot of people, for example, people whose cases are in administrative processing. So I think that there's relief available to people who meet the class definition in the case. There are lame duck asks that can be pressed to the Biden administration now to sort of expand the scope of relief to be inclusive of people who are in administrative processing. I think to Jean's point, the likelihood that that kind of demand will get any traction during a very time-bound lame duck period has everything to do with how loudly that demand is made at scale by impacted communities. And so I think it's an opportunity for communities to come together to say, hey, give us this in your last 2 months. And whether it's applied, and whether it's given and done, who knows, but I don't know that there's anything to lose from asking and trying. But I think I want to just sort of take a beat here to try to underline some of the common denominators across our comments. And so, like, you've pointed out, like, the national security rationales that are a kind of through line here. And I feel like it's really important in any of the work that we do respectively or collectively going forward to be very frank in calling out and exposing what is false in the narratives that prop up national security rationales. And so the things that are lurking within those rationales when you unpack them are deeply racist, white supremacist views of who does or doesn't present a putative threat, who does or doesn't belong, who is or isn't part of American society. And those rationales have impacts well beyond, like, AAPI and BAMEMSA communities. They extend to all non-white people, all racialized people, and have, like, a wide swath of impacts, certainly, like, inclusive of access to banking, access to work, access to property ownership, but in sort of less privileged contexts, like access to safety, access to liberty, access to family unity, and where border enforcement is concerned, like access to safety in very heightened, very stark contexts where people are trying to avail themselves of humanitarian protection that both international and domestic law enshrine, and are being told no. And the reason they're being told no is you're being viewed as a danger for no other reason than where you come from, the color of your skin, the religion you practice, and so on. And so there is no evidence, and that is hugely important to emphasize, there is no evidence to support attribution of danger to non-white people or to people who are adherents of religious minorities or whatever else. That is a lie. That is false. That is wrong. And so I think the more that we can do to sort of speak in unison, to call out what is false, and at the core of rationales that otherwise we know as a matter of law get all kinds of deference, certainly, like, in the hands of the courts, as a piece of narrative work, that's something forceful that we can all continue to do with each other. And then I think that when it comes to the audiences to whom those rationales are targeted, so like white people who are sort of told to swallow the fear-mongering that's being imposed on them for all kinds of reasons, any of those reasons, when you look closely, amount to a lie as well. And it's not in the interest of the people who are being asked to swallow and who are in fact swallowing those rationales. It's in nobody's interest. And I think the kinds of motives that allow all of this to happen with the force that it does, like, and now I'm sort of revealing a bit about my own worldviews in politics, but it's typically very profit-driven, and it's about keeping power and sort of profit concentrated among a very few who share certain characteristics. And I think it is sort of irresistible to sell that lie to people who you claim are part of your group, who stand to get something material if they accept the lie that you're giving, but who never, in fact, will get any of the benefits that are being sort of advanced. Like, I think we need to be clear in calling all of these things out, and doing it in a sort of as much of a cross-racial way as possible. We've got a lot of strength in numbers when we think of ourselves as common allies, impacted by the same big, bad lie.
Yeah. Well, people aren't the governments that, rule over them and so forth. And, you don't, your comments there reminded me of 2017, right after the first ban came down. So the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Intelligence and Analysis came out and said, look, there's no correlation between nationality, national origin, and national security threat, which is the entire basis that the ban is put on, and the entire basis of these property bans.
I'm sorry, just on that note, one of the top priorities on the federal side right now is the reinstatement of the China Initiative, right? And this was if you don't know, China Initiative was a executive order by Trump during his presidency, and he directed the FBI to basically stop everything you're doing and just investigate Chinese people, right? And so that's what they did. They stopped everything they were doing, and they investigated, in 2.5 years, they investigated about over 3,000 Chinese American scientists, doctors, and researchers. And out of those 3,000 plus cases, you want to guess how many cases of espionage they found?
Yeah.
Big fat zero. In fact, they filed 77 misdemeanor charges at people because they were trying to find anything to throw at people, like stuff like you didn't fill out this form correctly, you mislabeled this one form, you didn't pay your taxes on time, like stuff like that, right? And this is a 3,000 this is a 0 batting average, right? If you play baseball, right? 3,000 at bats, you hit 0. And they want to put it into law. And it's like, wait, why would you want to take a program that has failed catastrophically and make it law, right? Because to send a message, what's the message? Get out. You don't belong here. If you try to work here, we're going to make your life hell. And all those 3,000 lives and careers destroyed because they were part of an active FBI investigation. Their offices got tossed, search warrants, everything. Their careers are wrecked. A lot of them had to go somewhere else, go back to Taiwan, go back to China, something. So, and this is, rationality doesn't play into it. And the way I describe it is, people keep asking when we talk about this, people keep asking why? Why are they telling us to get out? And it's I don't know. You go ask the racists. But I can take a guess at it. It's because, the prior anti-Asian laws in the old days, in the 1850s and early 1900s, they got hot and they became vogue when the population became big, right? Since 1980s, the Asian population, including Iranians, has doubled every 10 years. Since 1980, the Asian community in America has doubled every 10 years. Chinese is actually growing faster than doubling, and the one growing even faster than Chinese is Indian. And don't be surprised when all these laws start, when Chinese, Indian, and Iranian kids take up the top 30, 40% of Harvard. That's pushing other people's kids out, and they're kind of not really thrilled about that. And I saw this one video clip of an Asian guy interviewing one of these hard right people, and said why you're a sensible person, why would you support this? And he says, well, I voted for Trump for just one reason, because if he implemented his policies correctly, then you can get rid of all these people from Muslim countries, all these people from African countries, all these people from Asian countries, because it's destroying whiteness. He literally said that. It's you're destroying my race by being here. There's no arguing with that. There's no counter to, I hate you and I want you to die, and I want you out of here. What we have to do is get other people who don't feel that way to say wake up, do you see what's happening? We've done this before. We've seen this movie before and the ending sucks. Let's stop now. And I think that's our best hope, is we can go to people when we talk about, hey, it's not okay to just take people's bank accounts. It's not okay to just say randomly you are banned from coming back into this country because, right? Because no reason. I think I'm hoping in my heart that at the end of the day, that the American people are good people. That they will see, hey, we've done the Japanese internment before. It was not cool then, it's not cool now, and anything that looks like it should be avoided. We're hoping that people can be taught, because like, hey, like, do you see the parallels? You see the parallels of what's happening here all over again. And we're hoping that people say, oh, I see it, I get it now. I understand, that's very different, right? That's the best case I can hope for.
Absolutely. So we've had a lot of discussion of kind of existing threats, but Trump has advertised more mass deportations, even more than in his first term. We've got threats of turning the National Guard on radical left-wing lunatics, per his word, and so forth. What kind of things can be done to prepare for this and kind of prevent some of these worst-case scenarios from playing out and protecting as many people as possible?
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I think we'll do audience questions after that as well.
Sure, I'm happy to take a crack at
Sure.
answering. So I guess a couple things. To, as a policy matter, decide to lean completely into interior immigration enforcement to the fullest extent that the law contemplates, it still raises sort of logistical and practical concerns, resource concerns and resource constraints. And so like the threat of pulling in additional resources like the National Guard to execute a project like this speaks to that reality. But the immigration laws and the enforcement that they allow are still constrained as a matter of law by provisions of the Constitution, by provisions of other applicable federal civil rights laws. They don't sort of, they're not a blank check to do whatever you want in the name of immigration enforcement. And so I think that what this means practically is that there's potential power in trying to promote at scale, in a language accessible way, through language that's very accessible, rights awareness. So you may be vulnerable to being targeted for immigration enforcement for any number of reasons, and here's what you should know are your rights in the kinds of situations where you may be faced with that kind of threat. Here is, as a matter of law, what can and can't be done in the course of enforcing the immigration laws against you. You can't be physically assaulted. You can't be killed. You have a right not to sort of give information that will be used against you as the basis to enforce immigration laws against you, and so on and so forth. There's rights awareness that, in essence, is somewhat straightforward and simple. In practice, can be very, very hard to apply, especially when you're under fear, but that I think can still be powerful and empowering, and it's among the things that advocacy groups all across the landscape and that sympathetic and concerned community members can be part of. That stands to be potentially powerful. So again, to sort of underline that, the legal frameworks that allow for immigration enforcement don't constitute a blank check. There are other laws and provisions that constrain what can be done, and the more that people understand those constraints and the better equipped that they are to be able to apply them in real time, that's protective. That's something potentially powerful. There's a lot more to sort of be planned for in terms of layers of defense and advocacy responses. Like, unfortunately, it's not the case that you have like a right to a free defense attorney in immigration removal proceedings the way that you do if you're an indigent defendant in criminal legal proceedings. That being said, though, there are a lot of municipalities around the country that have decided to fund that kind of universal representation, And I think those networks are networks that are going to be tested and utilized in defense of people who have access to them. I think there's the question of what can be done to expand those networks, to ensure that there are advocates who can stand by people trying to defend themselves against detention and deportation. And I think there's a lot of thinking going into how to make that happen, or how to increase the scale of those resources. But yeah, it's a very, very scary shadow we're all being put under. And I think from my perspective, among the most impactful things potentially is sort of the threshold rights awareness piece of things. Even though it's difficult to apply. It's really difficult to apply in person on the spot because of the adrenalized, genuine, real, physical fear and intimidation that people feel, but it can still be very powerful.
Sounds like a great project, education and practice for NIAC.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've done a lot of that over the years, and I think we'll certainly be engaging in that in partnership with a lot of other groups like Muslim advocates as well. Sure. All right. Anyone else want to address that, or go to questions from the audience then?
Questions?
Everyone's bummed out.
Yeah.
Welcome to my life.
Well, so Democrats, it feels like they struggled for many reasons across many issues in the election to present a vision, but consistently they were able to turn to abortion as a key organizing issue. Why have civil rights around, and in any of the spheres that we've talked about today? Why have Democrats not taken up the mantle, on these issues? I think in Washington in the same way as a differentiating factor. In what ways can they do that moving forward? Because with the Muslim ban, consistently when we speak to folks, it's a deep, resonant issue, but I don't get the sense that from our community they feel spoken to in that way.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's a political question.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I get what you're saying. I don't think it's that they don't talk about it, but it gets, one, drowned out by everything else. I mean, I don't know how much horrible crap I've had to talk about in the last month, right? And I mean, we talk about civil rights in terms of voting rights. We talk about civil rights in terms of women's rights, minority rights. I mean, I've been fighting a battle along with other Democrats for our rights, right? The problem is bigger than that. The problem that's bigger than that is the public doesn't care because everything's too good, right? Everyone feels everything's great, and nobody sees that their rights are disappearing. Even people, they interview women hey, you voted for Trump, but don't you care about the loss of abortion rights? I was like, oh, I'll never need to worry about that. Didn't you at one point? Did that not matter? Don't you have daughters? Don't you have granddaughters? Right? And even people within the Chinese American community, recent immigrant mainland Chinese, who would be the first ones affected by these types of laws, categorically refuse to believe that they're happening. And I printed it out for you. You can read it yourself, right? And you can shove it in front of their face. And they're like, I don't believe it. It's fake. That's the problem. It's not just Democrats. And there is a lot of fault among Democrats, and I'll take my share of the blame for not being more active, not in talking about it in the legislative side, but in our communities. That we should, I think Bernie's right. I think Bernie's right. I think we should go back to talking about our rights as middle-class Americans, as saving the American dream, but we talk about that American dream not just in terms of we should increase the minimum wage. It hasn't been increased since 2007. We should work on union rights. We should have better protections for safety. but at the same time, we said, hey, those also come with, we need to protect our personal rights. And that should be all one discussion. And we don't. That's it. Like, some of this is misinformation on the right, and there's only so much you can counter with that. Like, people didn't believe Trump's lies, but they also didn't believe Democrats' truth. And I don't know what to do about that. They disbelieved us both. They didn't think Trump would do the things that he did, and they didn't believe Democrats did and would continue to do the things that say we already have done. So I don't know how to address that, but it's something that has to be fixed.
There's also just like, on the Muslim ban in particular, a really boring kind of inside baseball explanation, but like we did have the No Ban Act, and it was included in the Build Back Better proposal, and I think in the original draft and got put forward and so forth, but you know, the conservative Democrats wanted to strip out all of the civil rights and immigration provisions in that bill, and so what got left was a, you know, good package like solar, you know, reimbursements and so forth, but like a lot of the things that Biden campaigned on and civil rights things and protections that we would have today are not in place because that stuff got stripped out.
Because it makes us uncomfortable. Like, talking about race, talking about civil rights makes Americans uncomfortable because it reminds them of all the things that are wrong with this country, but we don't ever want to address. And I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much time.
I will say just one point on that is that, you know, Obama in 2008, it's easy to forget, but he did criticize Guantanamo, the Patriot Act, that he did embrace patriotism, but there was a strong element of civil rights that was there. And I do think Harris similarly, I guess, foregrounded patriotism, but what was lacking was this embrace of like, hey, all of these things that happened under Trump were an offense to these core values, including civil rights. It was more focused just on like sort of January 6th and John Kelly and like sort of these discrete things, but less about who we are as a country, particularly from a civil rights angle.
Other questions?
We do. Hi, thank you all. This was a really wonderful panel. I'm also an attorney, so I'm very deeply entrenched in the legals of this all. But I think something that you mentioned at the top, Jean, which I thought was really interesting and also very poignant, was that these attacks on civil liberties have seemed to come from both sides, both from Dems and Republicans. I think especially when it comes to freedom of speech, we've seen that, especially everyone's talked a lot about Israel-Palestine, particularly in the wake of the Palestine protests. We've seen those attacks on freedom of speech. And interestingly, we've seen the Republicans kind of take up the helm of claiming that they're the ones protecting the First Amendment. And so I wonder sort of how you keep from having the Democratic Party also pay lip service to a lot of the civil liberties. I hear you talking about, you know, Obama's criticism of Guantanamo, but a lot of people would criticize him on saying that he fell short, and also under his presidency is when a lot of these national security powers were sort of expanded and the executive was given a lot more runway. And so how do we sort of actually get that, you know, it's not just, oh, well, when it's in the wrong hands, it's bad, but you actually kind of scale this back broadly, because I feel like from both sides, there's a lot of attacks on civil liberties and kind of this drive to become more authoritarian, so you're more efficient. What, in terms of actual practice, do you guys see sort of preventing this erosion? Because it seems to be coming from everywhere.
I'm not sure I have a silver bullet for it, but this is what we've done for the alien land laws and stuff, is one of the key things that has to be done is changing the narrative from what the proponents want, which is national security, fear, and more fear, right? To changing it to, it becomes a civil rights issue. People change their perspective. So like in the beginning of the alien land law fight in Texas, all the press coverage, even discussions among liberal Democrats was, well, I mean, why wouldn't you want to make sure that Chinese citizens and Iranian citizens are kept in check? Why wouldn't you want that? And then once the community started working on changing the narrative to say, hey, what did we do to you? Why do you hate Chinese people? Then all of a sudden people kind of started well, we don't hate you. I mean, why does this hate you? How does this affect you? And then so the community comes in and says, look, this is me. I'm a green card holder. You've known me for 20 years, but I've been a green card holder this whole time. And you're saying that I can't buy a house anymore? All of a sudden, that, like when you're talking about the stories, right, the narratives, those individual stories make a difference and they help change the narrative. But we have to have community members who are willing to speak up and saying, hey, I'm going to go talk to my neighbor and talk to them. And when we got those stories into the press all of a sudden went from, oh, why are they so mad? This is a sensible law, to this is a direct attack on civil rights that we've not seen for 60 years. And all of a sudden, the people pushing it got hit in the face with a lot of accusations of being racist. And that made them really uncomfortable, and they backed off. Right? That's how we deal with it. We have to basically say, we're not going to discuss it the way you want to discuss it. We will discuss it the way we want to discuss it, and we will override your narrative with ours. There's nothing else we can do. We have no other weapons other than that. And we have to tell and our audience is not the legislature. Our audience are our fellow Americans, right? We have to convince our neighbors that we are not monsters. We have to convince our neighbors that we deserve the same rights as they have. That's the only thing, because the Iranian community ain't big enough to fight back. The Chinese community ain't big enough to fight back. Indians, nope, right? And so on and so forth. But if we are all together, if all the communities get attacked, we grab all the Muslim banned countries, we grab all the alien landlord countries, we grab, I don't know what else, what other bullshit they're going to do. Round up all the people who are being oppressed, and we get together. And we fight as one. Instead of fighting each other, we fight our oppressors. And this is, I think, for me, my message to not only the Asian community, my message to all communities is this, is that the one day when communities like this across America finally wake up and realize who our oppressors are, and we realize that all our oppressors are exactly the same person, then we can fight and then we can win. And this is why it's, for me, like whenever I talk about alien land stuff, especially to Chinese people, I remind them point blank, you know who stood up for us when there were no Asians to stand up for us? Black legislators. Without being asked, time and time again, black legislators stood up against an anti-Asian bill. Remember that. Remember that. That our brotherhood and sisterhood is in our shared suffering. And the people who make them suffer are the people who make us suffer. And the day we figure that out as a community is the day we start winning.
One more question? We have time for one more question.
Hello, thank you very much for everything you've shared. I actually have a two-part question. It's probably for two panelists. It's regarding the Muslim ban coming back. I hadn't realized, first of all, that Trump said that for sure that he was going to reinstate that. It's really shocking to me. I'm just thinking to myself, for one, how is either the Muslim ban or the alien lands law legally possible, being that national origin is a protected class? I know you touched on some of that, but I'm not sure I completely understood. And on a second level, given that the communities affected by these laws are minority communities, so smaller simply just in population, they don't have the political weight, are there arguments that can be made to the non-minority communities in order that maybe that they could join that battle and feel that they would be arguing, and similar to how you said black legislators had stood up for anti-Asian laws or amendments to law. I'm just thinking the idea of xenophobic type policies that have existed in other countries like Japan, and how it so negatively affected their economy. Economy seems to be the big mover.
So I'm happy to sort of speak to the legality question, and I don't offer what I'm about to say with any pleasure at all, but just so we're all kind of like open-eyed together about the nature and state of what is or isn't permissible under United States law. So Jean made reference to Japanese internment. That was upheld as lawful by our Supreme Court, and that decision still stands as a matter of law. So the decision of the Supreme Court upholding the third version of the Muslim ban has actually been lambasted as being as bad as the Supreme Court precedent from decades prior upholding Japanese internment. And common to both decisions is a sort of very deep deference accorded to the executive branch of government on questions of putative national security, period. And I think that we've talked together here today about what's baked into the concept of national security. It's a very racialized concept that holds at its center a white supremacist view of safety, who is or isn't safe, and non-white people and racialized people are viewed as putative dangers, and then all kinds of policies flow from there, including Japanese internment, including the Muslim ban that the Supreme Court upheld. So that's the simplest way I can answer that question, is that it's an unfortunate aspect of the reality of contemporary United States law and jurisprudence that national security rationales, however racialized they are given a lot of deference in the way that they're interpreted by the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and it's something that is allowed to have force under the Constitution as a foundational document.
Can I just throw in just real quick? The basis of the Japanese internment was the application of the Alien Enemies Act of 1789, right? And you heard Trump recently talking about that.
It's still on the books.
It's still good law.
Yeah.
Korematsu, the case that justified it, said that there's no problem. The 14th Amendment existed during the Japanese internment. People were not stupid.
Yeah.
Right? But they said, but the Supreme Court just said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pretend we don't see the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, and I think something that I can add here is that the civil rights protections that are embodied in the Bill of Rights, the amendments to the Constitution, by and large, they are construed and applied and interpreted to offer a bit of a sliding scale depending on the nature of the government interests that are on the other side of the line of the individual liberty or interest that's at stake. And national security as a governmental interest is sort of the height of what gets deference and is sort of the courts can and often, too often, do take a hands-off approach. So that's not to say that we're all left powerless. We're not. Even as a matter of law, there are arguments around the margins that are still possible to press. But really, the thing that I want to emphasize is the most powerful things that we can do are the things that the folks on the panel today have flagged, which is to use narrative power and organizing and sort of cross-racial solidarity and narrative change. That's really where the rubber hits the road, and it's a thing that is available to us that doesn't turn on who holds institutional power, governmental power, who's in office, and so on.
I just want to echo that with the Muslim ban, I think it was really important when you saw the mass protests at Dulles and other airports, and I think that helped marshal and build support across communities.
Yeah.
One point to your original question, I think with private actors, it's a little different. So with the suit with Bank of America, they can't just generally invoke national security, although that is kind of what they did here, and it sort of did work. But so Wells Fargo had been sued recently in California for discriminated against DACA recipients. And they said, look, these people are less creditworthy because they might just go to their home country. And that was found to be, to violate state and federal civil rights, I think primarily state civil rights laws. And there was a settlement agreement where Wells Fargo agreed to no longer treat DACA recipients differently. So there are avenues, I think it's private actors to the extent that they do engage in this type of discrimination. And maybe, I don't know if the other panelists agree, but with the alien land laws, to the extent they're passed at the state level, there may be challenges, possibly under federal rights, federal civil rights laws.
Yeah.
But I haven't followed super carefully.
Yeah. And also, I mean, just Texas is trying to pass the alien land laws that affects national origin. I mean, second article of the Texas Constitution says you may not pass any laws that discriminates based on national origin. It's never stopped them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm that guy that gets up during each legislative session, no matter whose bill it is. I say, guys, this is unconstitutional. This is like first year con law, right? And my batting average is about like probably around 70% now of cases that I was right. It's unconstitutional. I got kicked back. But nobody listens. Nobody cares. Like I say it, people still vote exactly the way they're going to vote, and here we are.
Yeah, but that I think brings us back to the bottom line of the power that people inherently
Yes.
hold, and that's completely independent of the access they do or don't have to formal institutional channels of power that are governed by legal frameworks with all of their flaws and all of their embedded white supremacism and racism. Like, there's still power that people always have. It's not easy to sort of garner it collectively, but it's been done.
Yes.
And it's possible to do when we need to.
And we don't have a choice now.
Yeah. So try to summarize a little bit some of the silver linings and homework. We still live in a constitutional democracy. We've got to know our rights.
For now.
We've got to mobilize, and we've got to tell our story.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right. Thank you, everybody. Please join me in giving a round of applause.
Yeah.